this video we're going to look at clothes to wear for bushcraft. Stay tuned. Choosing clothing for bushcraft is no different to choosing any other clothing for any other outdoor pursuit. Its primary job is to provide you with protection. Protection from the environment, perhaps vegetation, insect life, or protection from the weather, sun, rain, wind, cold. We still follow the same principles as we would with any other clothing system that we use for an outdoor pursuit. Ideally, we want to use a layer system that allows us to regulate our body temperature by either adding or removing layers of clothing dependent on our work rate, whether we're very active or whether we're quite sedentary. We also choose fabrics that are suited to an outdoor environment. Ones that will keep us warm even when the fabric is wet. Ones that provide a degree of protection from wind and weather. Ideally something that is breathable so we don't suffer too badly with condensation inside our clothing. With bushcraft clothing, there's two other things that we need to consider. Number one is predominantly we do quite a lot of work around fires, and therefore our clothing needs to be relatively resistant to heat and sparks. Not completely fireproof, but resistant to heat and sparks. Also with bushcraft clothing, we tend to choose quite mute colours that fit in with our natural environment, greens, browns, etc. The clothing that I'm going to show you today is not designer clothing, nor is any of that clothing new. It's all quite old clothing, some of it I've had for 10 years or more. So it's good, tried and tested clothing. It's none of the big labels, none of the fancy fabrics, but it's a system that works, and it's a system that I can use year round depending which element of the clothing I choose. So we're going to start at the top and work our way down. We're going to start off with headwear. My year-round go-to headwear is normally a baseball cap. Made from cotton, this can be proofed for use in the winter with a little bit of wax. It's an extra layer on top of my head which helps protect the top of my head from the sun when it's sunny. It keeps the rain off. The peak not only keeps the rain out of my eyes, snow out of my eyes, wind out of my eyes, but also because it's peaked, when I'm using a hood, wherever I move my head, the hood moves with it too. So it's an exceptionally good year-round cap to wear. As heat rises, we lose a lot of our body heat through our head and the nape of our neck. A woolen beanie helps trap that heat around our head. Wool is a really good insulator, and I tend to use wool over an acrylic beanie because if I'm working around fires and I'm down close to the fire and blowing oxygen in, I don't want the hat melting. So wool works particularly well around fires. It's also an excellent insulator once it's wet. So my woolen beanie is my other piece of headwear that I tend to use. If the weather's really bad, perhaps cold, and we have rain or sleet or snow, then I combine the two. I use my baseball cap on top of my beanie. If it gets too warm, I can just roll the sides up, and it gives me a degree of protection similar to the Gucci outdoor mountain caps, but this one uses two existing pieces of clothing used together in the layer system, and it works very, very well. As I said, not only our head but also the nape of our neck area also loses quite a bit of heat. So having a scarf or something to seal that heat in, particularly when we've got warm air trapped in our clothing, as our clothing bellows, it can pump that warm air out, which in the winter can be a real heat loss. I use a woolen head over, a tube that pulls over my head and seals this area in. Most of the time when I'm out in the woods and the weather is good, my base layer tends to be just a simple cotton t-shirt. Although a lot of people say that cotton shouldn't really be worn in the outdoors because it's not particularly good when it gets wet, if the weather's not wet, it is a very good, comfortable layer to have. And quite often all I have is a base cotton t-shirt and a windproof smock over the top, or a wool shirt over the top, and that's fine. It's a nice comfortable system to wear. If the weather is cold and damp, then cotton isn't the best choice. If it is cold and damp, then what I tend to go for is a very lightweight woolen base layer. And the ones I tend to use are Italian Army surplus ones. They have a 60% wool, 30% cotton, 10% elastane content. So they're very lightweight. Because of the cotton in them, they're comfortable to wear. They insulate well because their insulating layer is wool. They're close fitting and they're ideal as a base layer. So if the weather's cold and the weather's damp, always wool next to my skin. For those chilly autumn, winter and springtime days, over the top of my woolen base layer, quite often I'll wear an AFV crew top. AFV standing for Armoured Fighting Vehicle. These are an army surplus item, so they're very cheap, probably the same price as the base layer. It's about £5 or £6 each. They've got a roll neck and they're made from something called Nomex, which is flame retardant. It's also very good thermally in that it keeps us warm, and it's relatively lightweight and fast drying, so it fits in very, very well with my clothing system. It's much better than the old Norwegian Army style top that was a loop stitch cotton, because when they got wet they weren't very good insulators and they took a long time to dry. The next item on my list also covers the torso area, and that's one of these simple, the classic outdoorsman's check shirt. These are made from wool and they're very, very lightweight. Quite a few people within bushcraft circles wear the heavyweight classic check woolen shirts, and they're very good as a good mid layer or a good outer layer. However, they are heavy. When they get wet, they take a long time to dry. They're also quite expensive for what they are. These light woolen shirts you can get from eBay, from vintage clothing sellers, for about £20, 15 to £20 each. They're made of wool, so again they're very good when they're wet. They don't pick up body odours, but also because they're nice and thin, they dry out quickly. And where you're using them with lots of different layers underneath, they still keep you as warm as the heavyweight woolen shirts worn with maybe just a t-shirt over the top. It gives you more flexibility in that you can also use one of these on their own in the summer, because wool is a loose weave, air circulates around. It can also be used just over a t-shirt or over our other base layers. When we stop working, or in the evening when we're sitting around the fire, we need something warm to put on, a really good, substantial, warm layer. Something that has become very underrated in recent years within bushcraft circles are fleece or fibre pile jackets. They're cheap, they work very well when they're wet because they're mostly made from polyamides. They compact down fairly small and they're easy care. If you ruin one with sparks around the fire, it doesn't really matter because, as I said, they're quite cheap to buy. The one that I use is a Dutch Army surplus one, made by Helly Hansen, and it has an 80% wool, 20% polyamide content. Therefore it's good round flames, doesn't pick up body odours, it's still very good when it's wet, and it compacts down fairly small. Because it's a surplus item, it's very, very cheap, at only £20 or so. I got my one from the same place I get most of my Army surplus gear, from Endicott's Army Surplus down in Exeter. If you're interested in one, they're the people to contact, and I'll put their web address at the end of the video. Some days you may need the extra insulation, but perhaps you're going to be quite active where you've got to move your arms. On those occasions, what I tend to go for is a thermal type vest. In my particular case, a down vest, but you can get ones filled with hollow fill, etc. These keep the heat in my core area, but it allows me the freedom of movement of my arms if I'm doing something fairly active, like perhaps using an axe or using a bow drill set. So a down vest, good investment. Mine came from a charity shop, and I think it was about £15. Over the top of all of those thermal layers, throughout the year, you also want an environmental layer, something that's going to keep the weather out, keep warm air or sometimes cool air in close to your body. On this occasion, what I normally have is a windproof smock, a simple garment, pulls over the head, it's got pockets so I've got access to the things that I need quickly. It's got a hood which helps me to keep my body heat in on those cold days, and something that's hard wearing. It's going to keep out the bugs, keep the vegetation at bay, and keep the weather at bay. The item that I normally go for is a simple polyester cotton workwear fabric over the head windproof smock. Because it's polyester cotton workwear fabric, it dries relatively quickly. It's also very, very durable. They're also quite cheap to buy, and if they're proofed with a washing proofer, they can be quite weatherproof. So I tend to go for nowadays cheap polycotton smock that works. Again, Endicott's Army Surplus, they're the only place I've seen that do them in the UK, but the one that I've got I've been very, very pleased with. So we've looked at the upper body, and now we're going to go on to what we wear on the lower half of our body. As far as underwear goes, I normally just go for a normal set of cotton briefs. If it's really cold, some lycra cycling shorts or some merino boxers, or again the Italian base layer long johns. They're cheap, they're made of wool, and they're very, very efficient. As far as trousers go, there are some excellent, very hard wearing trousers that you can buy relatively cheaply. If you want to go for something very expensive, then the Fail Raven trousers are very, very good. I tend to go for, again, a polyester cotton mix workwear style trouser. The M65 BDU trousers have 6 pockets and are excellent. They're made by lots and lots of different suppliers. They're cheap, they've got reinforced knees, they've got a reinforced seat, and as I've said, good pockets. The fabric is hard wearing, fast drying, pretty durable. So they make a very, very good trouser. Another trouser worth looking at are the Austrian Army Surplus combat trouser. They're a sort of grey-green in colour. They have a couple of hand pockets that are nice and deep so you don't lose stuff out of them. No rear pockets, good zip up thigh pockets as well. Reinforced knees, very hard wearing fabric, very, very fast drying fabric, and relatively cheap as well, about £15 a pair. Days when it's really, really hot, I tend to go for a BDU short. So the pockets are in exactly the same places. I've still got my 6 pockets. The fabric's exactly the same. I've just got them in short form rather than in full length trouser form. So we've covered the upper body, we've covered the head, we've covered our legs. Now we're going to look at our feet. Feet are pretty important because they're what get us from A to B, so it's important that we look after them. I use a 2 or sometimes 3 sock system. I use a lightweight inner sock, which I tend to go for cheap bamboo inner socks. They feel like silk. They have the same thermal properties as silk. They're a lot harder wearing than silk, and you can buy them on eBay for about £5 for 3 or 4 pairs. So they're very, very cheap, very durable, and they work very well. Over the top of this, I go for a woolen sock. I use the H&J Commando socks. They have high wool content, a loop stitch sole, padding around the toes area, and they're calf length. And these over the top of the bamboo socks mean that I'm pretty much blister free, as one sock slides against the other and protects the foot inside. If the weather is particularly wet, then I might exchange my Commando sock for one of the seal skin socks designed to go with a high leg boot. Now we're going to look at our footwear. We've looked at what we wear sock wise, so what goes over the top. Ideally you want a boot that is relatively lightweight, supportive and robust, that can protect your foot from the environment, but that is also fast drying if it gets completely wet, reasonably waterproof. I tend not to go for a Gore-Tex lining because normally you have not only Gore-Tex but you also have Thinsulate. These boots can be too warm. They're also very slow to dry because of the number of layers of fabric inside. The boot that I use is an army surplus boot. It's made by a company called Altberg, and it's their Defender model, the one that is currently on issue to the British Army. It's a simple walking boot in a high leg form with a cambrel lining. I think it was tested everywhere from Cyprus and Kenya all the way up to Norway. So it's a good boot for use in a wide variety of terrains, and that's my normal #1 go-to boot. When the weather's really warm and the boot's perhaps a little bit too much, then I want a light training type shoe. The shoe that I've used for the last 3 or 4 years, and I'm on my second pair now, is the Carrymore Austin. It's an old school trainer, has a little bit of padding in the sole, it laces all the way down to the toe, and it's got an all suede construction. The first pair that I got, I wore to death, literally. I wore through the sole because I wore them almost continually for about 2 years. I've now got my second pair, and they're a superb shoe and really worth looking at. They're also very cost effective in that you can pick them up for anywhere between £30 down to about £15 depending on who you buy them from. The last item on the lower leg, not only do you want a set of boots, but I also use a set of gaiters, old cotton canvas gaiters. They breathe really, really well, and during the winter they help to keep mud, stones, snow, etc. off my boots and my trousers, and in the summer they're an extra layer to protect you from vegetation, stinging nettles, brambles, etc. The last item that I'm going to look at is my weatherproof barrier. Obviously my windproof smock will keep out a light shower and the wind, but if you get a heavy downpour, then you might want something that's a little bit more waterproof. If I'm going up to northwest Scotland or Snowdonia or Dartmoor, then I tend to go for quite a high-tech breathable jacket with pit zips and a wired hood. But for just bushcraft, if I'm going to the local woods, what I tend to go for is a simple PU nylon rain suit. It packs down really small, fits in my Bergen. It's so small and lightweight that I virtually don't know that I'm carrying it. When I get heavy rain and heavy weather, I can pull this on over the top. Although you do get some condensation inside, if the clothing that you're wearing underneath is the right clothing, i.e. wool, that still works when it's wet, then you shouldn't have any major problems with condensation. As I said, if I'm bushcrafting, I'm not normally doing lots of stuff that's going to make me sweat a lot, like I would if I was walking up a mountain. So a simple PU nylon rain suit is cheap, very, very effective. Well, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you did, then please subscribe to our channel. Until next time, stay safe. Bye for now.